Happy Thursday. I call this meeting to order at 9:06 a.m. on April 18th, 2024. For our guests and constituents, I am Dr. Tanika East. I'm the chairman of the State Advisory Panel for Exceptional Children. I want us to be mindful of our reasoning and purpose. And this is the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, requires that the state establish advisory panels to advise and assist the Kentucky Department of Education on special education and related services for children with disabilities. The SAPEC members represent various agencies, individuals with disabilities, parents of children with disabilities, service providers, and administrators. The advisory panel must advise the SEA of unmet needs within the state of the education for children with disabilities, comment publicly on any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities, advise the SEA in developing evaluations and reporting on data to the Secretary under Section 618 of the Act. Advise the SEA in develop correction action plans to address findings identified in the Federal Monitoring Reporting Units under Part B of the Act, and advise the SEA in developing and implementing policies relating to the coordination of services for children with disabilities. I will now turn it over to Ms. Misty Green, who will review our meeting norms.
Interpreters are provided at each SAPEC meeting. Members must speak when called on for roll call or any voting. When speaking, please state your name each time so the American Sign Language interpreters can communicate who is speaking to those using interpretive services. And just a reminder, stay focused on the topic agenda at hand for the sake of time, be that in regular business or committee meetings. Meeting materials are located in email and posted in the SAPEC meeting Google folder. Additional feedback from members is provided through the meeting exit slip. Please have your camera on and mute your microphone when not speaking. If participating as a SAPEC member online, please click on the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. The recording secretary is taking notes for the meeting. Meeting materials are located in email and posted in the SAPEC Google folder.
At this time, we will have an update on SAPEC membership. And I do not think that we have any updates today, but I'll defer to Melody if we have any updates on membership. That's okay. I know, right?
No, there are no updates for anything new today, other than I'm not sure if the group had heard, we were informed before the legislative session began that, these appointments through the governor's office would not be considered, new appointments would not be considered during the legislative session. Now that has ended and we're trickling near the end, I think the governor does still have a few bills in front of him to either sign or veto. So that is the first thing on my list, is to go ahead and make sure that we pursue the, trying to fill the membership roles that we have vacant. Any questions?
Any questions? Online, any questions? Okay, thank you. We'll start with roll call. If you're online, please unmute so that Emily can note that. If you're present, please say it loud enough so we can get that recorded in the minutes today. Barlow. Bradley.
Present.
Carruthers. Clark.
Sorry, I think I responded to the wrong one. I couldn't hear the first name. Tiffany Clark, present.
Mark, you absent. Cole. Crump. Curry.
Present.
East. Present. Stumbo.
Present.
Fox.
Present.
Gals. Jones. Kleiner. Miller. Morgan.
Present.
Noel. Noel. Reed. Reed. Robinson. Robinson. Ford. And ex officio Hilton. I have Bradley, Brewer, Clark, Curry, East, Stumbo, Fox, Morgan, and Hilton. Any members that I missed? And we do not have a quorum today. We do now. Sorry, we can vote if needed. Thank you. Don't forget, we did send the agenda. If you are, we ask that you stay on, keep your cameras on, and we'll try to get those voting items moved up. If I could ask you now to review the agenda for a second, and then I need a motion from the floor to review and accept and adopt today's agenda.
motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Actually needed amended.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes.
Amend the,
And,
amend the agenda.
thanks.
We need to move the legislative update from line item 9 to 7. And then we'll move the committee meetings from 12 to 9.
Make those changes to the agenda.
I have a motion on the floor to amend today's agenda with the following items, moving legislative update from item 9 to 7, and moving the committee meetings from 12 to 9. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second, Curry. Are there any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? Any abstention? The ayes have it. It's been moved and properly seconded to amend the agenda. Thank you. Now we will review the minutes from the last meeting of January 18, 2024. Again, those were sent out via email and in the SAPEC folder. If we could take 2 minutes to review those. And then we'll need a motion to approve January 18th minutes.
Curry, I make a motion to accept the meeting summary for January 18th, 2024.
A motion on the floor by Curry to accept the January 18th, 2024 meeting. Can I have a second?
Tiffany Clark, I'll second.
Second, Clark. Are there any discussion? You ready for the question? All those approve, say aye.
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 Any opposed, nay? Any abstention? Motion approved to accept the minutes as printed on January 18, 2024. Now we will have an update from our interim commissioner, Robin Kinney, and provide us an update. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Good morning. My name is Robin Kinney. I'm serving as the interim commissioner here at the Kentucky Department of Education. I was asked to serve in this role by the Kentucky Board of Education in October of last year. And really my primary purpose in serving in this role is to keep us moving forward, of course, as an agency, but also to assist in trying to find our next permanent commissioner of the Department of Education. Let me first start out with a thank you to the members of this advisory panel. I know we are legally required to have this, but let me say we very much appreciate the input and feedback that you provide each and every day to our staff here at the Department of Education and on behalf of students with disabilities and in the area of special education services. I also want to thank the staff here. And kind of brag on them just a little bit. They are true advocates on behalf of underserved populations, our students across our local school districts in Kentucky. They are constantly at the table to remind us of the importance of making sure that we include those students in each and every decision that we have. And so we are very appreciative to Dr. Greta Hilton and her staff, many of them in our audience today. And finally, just as another thank you to our interpreters that come each and every meeting here at the Kentucky Department of Education to make sure that we, again, keep those people that are watching from afar and those in the room can participate actively in the discussions that are going on. So much appreciation to all that. If I can have just a few minutes, because I see you all have a very full agenda, and my understanding is you do have a very full agenda every time you meet. But I was going to tell you a little bit about our new commissioner that is scheduled to join us on July 1st. Our new commissioner was named by the Kentucky Board of Education on March 21st. His name is Dr. Robbie Fletcher. He is currently the superintendent in Lawrence County, where he has been superintendent for about the last 10 years. To us with a wealth of experience from a local school district, in that he has been a teacher, he's been an assistant principal, he's been a principal, and he has been superintendent. But he also comes to us with experience from the statewide level. He is currently the chair of the local superintendent's advisory council, and that is elected by his peers. And so he has served in that capacity with us, and also the superintendent's advisory council. He's also worked with the General Assembly, serving in various committees where they leadership of the Kentucky General Assembly has asked him to serve. And he's also served on activities where the governor has asked him to serve. So he has that breadth of experience, not only from a superintendent in his local school district, but also from a statewide perspective. He is a graduate from Morehead State University, and he also has a degree from the University of Kentucky. And he is anxious to get here and join us. Of course, he still has ongoing responsibilities in Lawrence County. He's finishing up the school year there and all the busy activities that comes with the end of the school year, but he will be joining us July 1st. If I can just share with you also the reasons, sort of the support behind Dr. Fletcher's desire to have him serve with us in this capacity. The the Kentucky Board of Education really boiled down to what they wanted into 4 big categories. They wanted someone who would be an ambassador or a statesperson for us, able to work with the Kentucky General Assembly and engage in a very mutually beneficial relationship, lots of communication, very important, and all of that in support of public education. So really looking at that public education lens. Looking for an expert instructional leader, and I think with his background in teaching and instruction, he has that. But especially looking at underserved population of learners and their families. So that was a high criteria for the Kentucky Board of Education. A strong organizational leader to lead the Kentucky Department of Education, our staff here, and really looking at continuing to implement the Kentucky United We Learn initiative. And part of that Kentucky United We Learn initiative, really looking at vibrant learning experiences for all of our students, each and every student. And you will hear Dr. Fletcher, once he becomes a little more public in his speaking, you will hear him. His slogan in Lawrence County was all in LC, all in Lawrence County. And he really means that. And has asked that we adopt sort of a similar all-in attitude here at the Kentucky Department of Education. And then finally, a visionary innovator, someone who's not afraid to try new things toward the benefit of our students. So those are the 4 big areas. The Kentucky Board of Education felt that Dr. Fletcher met those criterion, and we are excited to have him join us on July 1st. That is the big update from the Kentucky Department of Education. I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you don't mind, I'm going to stick around for a while so I can listen and learn from your meeting today in anticipation when Dr. Fletcher, because by your next meeting, Dr. Fletcher will be here. And so I'm happy to update him on the activities of your advisory panel as we start transitioning.
Well, we thank you for joining us. We know that you are very, very busy in your duties, but we don't take it lightly that you've taken time out to join us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and you're more than welcome. I'll yield to online. Are there any questions? Any questions? To the floor on site, any questions? Well, Dr. Kenny will be staying around, and if we do, she is in the room, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions again. Thank you for your presence today. Next on the agenda, this is your real schedule now. We'll have a legislative update from Ms. Melody Cooper.
So you could go ahead and go forward. So I think I've met everybody, but I'm Melody Cooper and I'm the policy advisor here for the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. And before I jump right into talking about some of the bills and the action, I'll remind everybody that the session did come to a close on Monday, the 15th. There are still a few bills before the governor that he can either sign or veto. So we'll talk about a little bit more about that as we get to one of my later slides. But we did, this was also the budget session. So a biennial budget has been passed in House Bill 6, and that's where we'll start. So apologize, I'm going to look back and forth between my notes and the slide up there. But if there are questions throughout, just please feel free to raise your hand. It's okay to interrupt and ask questions. So House Bill 6 was the budget bill, and there were several items of interest that would relate to the Kentucky Department of Education specifically. So there was an increase in that SEEK funding. Also for the SEEK transportation funding, we saw an increase. And interestingly, there was some language included in the budget bill where they encourage districts to use some of that SEEK funding toward certified and classified salary increases. So, that's always a big conversation throughout the state. And so that's where they added that support in for the salary increases within the districts. Language was stayed in that supports the full day kindergarten statewide. There was some additional language about a Star Academy pilot program. I don't know a lot about this right now, other than, I'm interested to follow and see what this is. In the budget language, it's kind of described as possibly some charter schools housed within public schools throughout the state where they would be doing a 3-year pilot in 5 locations throughout the state. So other than that, I don't know much more about it than that, so I'm interested to see what comes from that. There was some funding for school resource officers. Now, they're not fully funded. This language allows KDE or directs KDE to assist on a reimbursement basis salaries for school resource officers. I believe it's up to $20,000 for a campus, each campus that employs a full-time on-site school resource officer. So again, it wouldn't be a full funding, but it would help. There is language also that requires districts to post their, proficiency and distinguished results in reading and math, and then for the KDE to also post a rank order of the schools throughout the state, schools and districts. And then House Bill 1, this was a different budget bill that was included this year that dealt more with, so House Bill 6 is the biennial budget that covers 2 years. House Bill 1 is more for one-off expenditures from a different set of funds, kind of a rainy day fund. And so there was language included there so that we could purchase, where KDE would do the purchasing for the automated, I didn't spell that out now, automated external defibrillators, AEDs, 2.5 million for purchasing those for public schools where they are now required. Any questions on that part before I move on? Okay, so next slide. So there were also some items in House Bill 6 that are OCL specific, so I listed those out separately. So the Kentucky School for the Blind and Kentucky School for the Deaf maintained their operating funds and capital projects. The KSB and KSD step and rank for staff was included in that, so everything maintained there. And then you'll see our learning and results services programs, which we call the LARS items. Those are all maintained as well. So state funded preschool, extended school services, and gifted and talented all come through the Office of Special Education Early Learning, and they maintained their funding from the previous budget. And then these were some items included in House Bill 6 where it will impact our education partners and of course just education throughout the state. So the Cabinet for Health and Family Services received some funding for additional family resource youth service centers, which referred to as the Friskies, where they're serving multiple schools. So I think there's some additional funding to add some relief there. We'll talk a little bit more about this Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority in one of the later slides, but they got some funding for a couple of teacher retention and recruitment activities. One, a teacher scholarship program, or I think it's worded as a loan forgiveness program actually, and then a student teacher stipend program as well. And then the Auditor of Public Accounts received funding for an audit of the Jefferson County Public. Next slide. Any questions so far? All right, so the next list of bills are those that have been enacted. And so they could have been enacted either by signature of the governor. The governor could let them become law without his signature, or he could have vetoed them and then that veto was overridden. So in one of those three ways, these have become enacted. Now, a couple of them have asterisks next to them, and that indicates bills that were passed with an emergency clause, which means they took effect immediately. All of the other bills listed will take effect sometime in mid-July. We don't have that exact date yet. It will be released by the Attorney General in a few weeks, but mid-July is when you can expect those. So Senate Bill 2 is the student safety and mental health bill that got a lot of attention in, conversation during the session. It does involve guardians and it's permissive. Districts may employ guardians if they're unable to fulfill the school resource officer requirements due to funding. So there are different requirements about who could serve as a guardian, but districts may hire those if they want, and they would have to go through the Center for School Safety to make sure that everybody complied with those requirements. There were also some really positive things in this bill regarding mental health. So trauma-informed teen, adding an extra suicide prevention lesson. There's already one required. And so this requires that districts would provide 2 for students in, I believe, grade 4 is where it starts, grade 4 through 12. That they would provide those twice a year, once by September 15th and once by January 15th. And then there is another part of that bill that's interesting. As funds allow, the Center for School Safety would oversee a school mapping data program to assist first responders if responding to an emergency call from a school. And that would be for districts who volunteer for that service. Okay, Senate Bill 11 is a juvenile justice bill, and it is, the purpose there is to reduce the gap between times that a charges might be filed against the student and the time when the school is notified. So a court designated worker would have timelines for providing that notification to the schools. And then if the charges were diverted in some way or dismissed, then the school would receive that notice as well, and then they would expunge anything from the student record regarding those charges. Senate Bill 265 deals with our option 7 alternative certification pathway. So it's just another effort at being able to recruit teachers, and I guess it reduces some of the barriers that had been in place in that option 7. It aligns more with option 6 now. And so it's going to make it a little easier, not only for the certification to be obtained, but then also for districts to do the hiring of those teachers that are pursuing the option 7 pathway. There's also some mentorship language in there that kind of harkens back to the K-TIP days. I don't think there was funding attached to that right now. No, okay. There was not funding attached to it right now, but maybe, fingers crossed someday. House Bill 2, now this is also a big point of conversation. This allows for ballot language to be added to the ballots in the statewide ballots in November for a constitutional amendment that would allow public funds to support non-public school education. So if this were to be ratified by the voters in November, then more action would be needed from the legislature in the next session to kind of define how that would work. So right now it's just the language on the ballot, and voters will see that in November. House Bill 142 involves products that contain nicotine and vaping. And so it's some positive things there is that it really requires a lot more educational material about cessation, both for students and for families. It sets a few parameters around disciplinary actions, and the more stringent disciplinary actions, that wording is permissive so that districts do have some flexibility in how they want to deal with their nicotine policies within the district. House Bill 377, that is the one that we talked about with Kia earlier. So that's the teacher recruitment and retention bill, where it sets up that loan forgiveness and student teacher stipend that Kia will manage. House Bill 446 is a transportation, requires districts to adopt a transportation services policy. So it would really align with a discipline policy, that it just gets more specific into some of the options that different staff members have, especially bus drivers or aides on bus drivers when they're transporting students. House Bill 447 is another public school transportation bill, and this one allows, it's trying to create some flexibility for districts where they've got some of those back windy roads where they could use those big, like 9-passenger vans to transport students. They can do this now for special programs and activities, but this would allow them to do it for school transportation to and from. And so, I don't know how many districts might pursue that. It is, commonly accepted that school buses are the safest way for students to be transported, but this could provide some relief for districts that are struggling with transportation issues. House Bill 695 is the Adaptive Kindergarten Readiness Pilot Project. So this will be open to 4- and 5-year-olds who are not currently enrolled in a public preschool program and are eligible to enroll in kindergarten the following year. And it's a pilot project that's set for 2 years as federal funds are available. And so KDE would administer this if there are federal funds available. And it's basically, it's kind of an online program, but it really is supposed to also boost family engagement. So some recruitment would be done probably through child care centers and possibly through other avenues, early childhood education avenues, where they would recruit families who would participate in this and kind of see the results as far as the impact on school readiness at the end of the pilot. And they do have some parts in there where 40% of the membership for the pilot would be reserved for families who are up to no more than 200% of the federal poverty level. And then if families are no more than 400% of the federal poverty level, they could also receive the hardware and the internet connectivity that they would need at home to participate in the activity. And so the Department of Education would find a service provider for that That would be our role in it. And then House Concurrent Resolution 81 was the Efficient and Effective School District Governance Task Force. And it's worded so that this will look into the governance and all that goes into that of any district with enrollment of more than 75,000 students. So that is one district in the state. Okay, let's see if I think I covered everything. Any questions on that page for the enacted bill?
I do have a question.
Okay.
How did they determine what was an emergency statute?
I don't know exactly how they make those determinations when they're writing the bill, but all they have to do is add it in there. So like if you're looking at the bills online, it'll say, adaptive kindergarten, this one's not an emergency, but just as an example, adaptive kindergarten readiness pilot project and declaring an emergency. And so whenever you see that language next to a bill, it means that they would enact it immediately. Now, as far as what goes into those decisions, it just kind of depends on if there are other timelines that they're trying to meet or, projects that are about to expire that need to be enacted immediately. So that
it's
part I don't.
determined by the bill sponsor.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes they'll add that later, like throughout the process when they're making amendments, things like that, they'll determine that it is going to be an emergency clause, or sometimes they'll take it off, that it's not going to be declared with an emergency clause. Any other questions? Okay, so next slide. So the next list, these are bills that have been delivered to the governor. And so they were all delivered after the official veto period had ended. And so what that means is that if the governor were to veto any of these, the veto would stand. They would not be able to override the veto because of it being after the official veto period. So I'll go ahead and go through these, and a couple of them, last I checked this morning, a couple of them have been signed. This first one is one of those that was signed yesterday. So it adds cursive handwriting as a course of study in elementary school beginning in the 25-26 school year. Are we happy about that, Dr. Reese?
They missed that. That's important. You learned in third grade. Just couldn't wait to get to third grade to learn cursive.
Oh, I know it. But I can tell you as a former third grade teacher that I did well teaching cursive. It's like, oh my gosh. Okay. House Bill 162 is Education Chair Tipton's numeracy bill. And so that one it's similar to the early literacy legislation that we've had in the past. So kind of setting up similar programs for early numeracy as well. House Bill 169 requires AEDs. I don't have to say the whole thing this time. I said it once. AEDs in all school buildings and at school sanctioned athletic practices and competitions. House Bill 300 would set timelines for the EPSB in investigating educator misconduct. House Bill 354 requires, it would require the KDE to pay some health insurance premium reimbursements for retirees who participated in hazardous positions prior to July 1st, 2003. House Bill 387 is about substitute teacher certification. So currently substitute teachers receive like a 1-year certification that needs to be renewed every year. This allows districts, and again, it's permissive. It does not mandate them to do this, but it allows districts who might be struggling to find substitute teachers under certain parameters to extend those certifications for substitute teachers. So they might have them on hand a little bit longer if they meet certain requirements. And again, that's permissive for districts to do it if they want to. House Bill 449 relates to local boards of education. And I believe that's the one, now I'm blanking on it. I believe that's the one where they're trying to make it a little easier to provide a statement about having your high school diploma to serve on a local board of education. Is that right, Commissioner? I think that's the one. It's like I'm blanking all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think
believe that's the one.
I think that is the one.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have high schools that are no longer in existence. And so it's very difficult to get a diploma or proof of that diploma from them. So I think that's what the issue that they're trying to address.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your assistance. I'm glad you're here. House Bill 499, this is one that would apply to the career and technical education and a funding distribution formula for those, the locally and state operated CTE programs and ATCs. And also establishes some criteria for the funding formula as well. So it's adding in some quality indicators. So that's a really good thing. And then House Bill 829 is about medicinal cannabis. I'm including this here because it will impact school districts. They'll be required to adopt a district policy, whether they allow or don't allow medicinal cannabis to be administered on school property. And that one actually was signed yesterday as well. So right now, those are the top and the bottom are the only two that I'm aware of that were signed by the governor yesterday. Any questions on those? All right, and my last slide, I don't have to say much about because Interim Commissioner Kenny covered most of this for us. She gave us a lot more detail too than I had included. I will say the interesting thing about Dr. Fletcher being able to join the KDE now on July 1 is that this is the first time that any of our commissioners were subject to the Senate confirmation. And so that was really interesting to see that process play out. And he did speak before the Senate Education Commission Senate Education Committee, last Friday and did a great job. So anybody who wants to go out and watch that recording, I encourage you to do so. And that wraps it up for me. Are there any questions about specific bills or anything else?
Got a question about the student teacher stipend. I find that interesting.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So what I know about that is that it would be up to $5,000. So again, that would be administered by Kia, and it would be up to $5,000 as funds were available if they're during the semester that they are doing their student teaching. And so that would apply if there's not funding available for $5,000 for everybody who participates, then they would have to promulgate some regulations to, figure out how that funding would work. And then there are some parameters attached to that then as far as like employment afterwards goes and that kind of thing. So yeah, up to $5,000. So that would have been great.
Yeah.
I would love to add that one. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because it's such a heavy push in post-secondary for internships, but student teachers don't have that flexibility. They have to be there. It's required and they don't get paid for it, but they could be a marketing major, a business major, and go get a grandiose position that transcends into full-time employment with a stipend and amenities, relationships, networking, and all that great thing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it is apparent that, they're really, they're putting a lot of thought into the different strategies for teacher recruitment and retention within the state. Something we need to pay attention to. Yeah, thanks for your question. Anybody else?
Do we have any hands online? As always, Ms. Melody, thank you so much for the legislative update and joining us.
Yeah.
Right now, I have 9:52. If we can recess and take a break until 10 a.m., we'll reconvene at 10 a.m. and we'll pick up with our public comment. Call this meeting back to order at 10:02 a.m. on April 18th, 2024. At this time, we will share any comments from the public that we've received online. Do we have any comments we've received online? I ask if we have anyone on site for public comment at this time. We ask that you come forward to any of the designated seating areas. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Public comment will be permitted in person for 3 minutes. Please remember, SAPEC members, that this is not a discussion, only for comment. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your commentary.
Thank you. My name is Joy Fields. I am a parent. I have a second grader in Fayette County public school. And with my experience, sorry, I'm a little nervous. Miles is in second grade, and at the age of 4, he was diagnosed with moderate autism, and he has developmental delay. We did early intervention, and he is on an IEP. I'm here to just to comment about the challenges as a parent that we see, getting his teachers to not only follow his IEP, and to do so without having to fight them as a parent. I have, within the past couple of years, had to have several art meetings in order to get his teachers to follow the IEP. I had to have several meetings regarding his teachers to protect him from bullying. And these are just a couple of challenges that we face in public schools. I've gone online, I've done research to seek guidance. I've downloaded a plethora of information. And I don't know who to reach out to for assistance. And I understand none of this is not a conversation, but I came here hoping to find information on, who I can reach out to as a parent, so that I can send my child to school every day.
Excuse me, Ms. Fields, can you speak into the mic a
I'm
little bit more?
sorry. So I came here for guidance to, for my child. I just want to advocate for him and to let you all know as the parent some of the challenges that we go through. He is great. His special ed teacher is wonderful. But there are still a lot of challenges that we face each day throughout the year, although we are making progress. But it's a challenge throughout the entire year. So we are not able to utilize the complete time that we have during the school year in order for him to not only progress, but to succeed to his full potential. And sorry, Rivers, I had many, many notes. I've experienced because of this. My child has, obsessively written down negative comments about himself that's been told to him throughout the day by his teachers. He bites his nails until they bleed. He cries, and he's still love school. He loves to learn, and I'm at a loss because I don't know where to turn to. I've met with his principals and teachers. I've had several art meetings. But we're slowly inching towards progress. I don't think that is acceptable. As teachers, as the adults that are supposed to be protected.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fields, for your comment. At this time, we will move into our committee meetings. And with our 2024 format, for those of us who are new to joining us in person and with this hybrid model, we are allotted 10 minutes for each committee to present if they are online and or in person. They will then unmute and unmic and kind of have a hybrid of their meeting and report out. If they are not present, we will then move on to the next committee meeting. I'm going to open the floor for the first subcommittee to transitions. I'll now turn it over to Tal Curry.
Well, for the transition subcommittee, I wish I had more to report, but we haven't met since we were last together. I was trying to pull up notes from the Google Drive. May not have saved it in the right place though, so. If another subcommittee is ready to present, they certainly can, and I will look and make sure I not miss anything.
Do you want to go with your presentation?
I certainly can. It'll be perfect time. It's okay.
Okay.
Well, in regard to transition, I don't know if someone can put that up or not, but
Do you have the presentation?
no, I sent it to
Sorry.
just a minute ago.
We'll come back to transition. Do I have anyone available with the Parent Involvement Committee?
I think that's typically my group. Michelle, I don't know if Michelle's in here right now. But I think
I'm
we're
here.
still, yeah, our quest continues to be the same, right? We bring this to this council each time that we would love to see a way for the parent input surveys to be provided or offered, that link offered during the ARC meeting. I think we discussed that, brought that attention to the panel last time. I would really like to see that ARC form that they have to fill out, if there's a way that that could be included, or just, you know, giving guidance to the districts on how to distribute that where it's in line with the ARC meeting, rather than just massive emails that go out. And some districts clearly were doing it better than others. My home district was just kind of an email that went out, although they did give feedback that they have probably a 90% participation rate, which was great. I think Tiffany maybe asked her district what they were doing as well, and it came out via text message. I just think we could probably give a little bit more guidance to the department on how to distribute those for better participation. Yep. Michelle, you have anything to add?
No, you did a great job.
Okay.
I think you're right. I know we have been talking about this survey for a while and how it's distributed. Do we have any update on how that's done or can do better?
Gonna ask Veronica Sullivan to share information with you regarding that. It lives, if you will, in Division of IDA implementation. And there are, they have a process for how that's distributed, but certainly open to any recommendations or feedback for how to improve that, because it has been a challenge over the years.
So this is Veronica Sullivan. We have a process that we have been continuing to work over the last few years to increase our participation rates. We provide the districts with form letters, templates to use. Now, how they distribute that, it is a district decision, how that's distributed. We give them sample letters. We offer the letters in multiple languages, and we're increasing the number of languages that's offered in. We also set a statewide target of at least 25% participation rate. Generally, statistically, a 30% participation rate in a survey is considered good. We would like to do much better than that, obviously. And some districts choose to do that at ARCs, but some may not. But we do leave that up to the district, but we're definitely open to hear from the panel on suggestions. We could bring in our indicator 8, which is our parent survey, for the state performance plan and annual performance report consultant who does that work, to present to the panel in the future, just to give you a better understanding of the survey and how that's distributed and calculated. And then definitely would like to hear from the panel on suggestions.
And I just have a question. So we basically, it's just an option for the district if they choose to participate.
So districts, that is an indicator that we report to the Office of Special Education Grants at the U.S. Department of Education. So it's a state indicator that we report. Districts they choose how they do it. We also have a window that's open for them to distribute that, so that we're able to collect that data and analyze that data and have it ready to report in our federal report.
I misunderstood.
If I could add to that, David, the requirement comes from USAID and the requirements at the state level. So we are required to disseminate, to request districts to get the data, but it isn't compliance.
Yeah.
So we don't have a mechanism should it not get disseminated to 100% of the parents, or if 100% of the parents don't respond, we don't have a mechanism for responding any type of compliance. It's we want to hear parental feedback. We want to hear the voice of families. As many and as much feedback as we can get, we report on. And just as a little bit of background information, 25% sounds like a low number as far as the target when you're thinking about the feedback, but we have been really low in years past. And so we're seeing an upward trend in the numbers as far as feedback. We encourage, request, beg, provide support, have people call districts. We actually do this little competition through our special education regional technical assistance centers on who can get the most participation rate, because everybody loves a healthy competition, and they do a good job helping us with that to try to get more and more feedback. But again, some districts, they want to sit with parents and do that during those ARCs. Others want to give it to them. Then, parents and families have a preference on how they wish to receive that as well. So, it's something we're continuing to try to improve upon. But it is a challenge when, you've got 100,000 plus families of children with disabilities across the Commonwealth. And we've got layers of, the state, the region, the districts, and schools. It's a challenge to get that feedback. So we're open to any and all suggestions, but that's hopefully helps to kind of, gain some information on how and why.
Can you again share with us the timeline of this survey?
So the window opens.
Late winter, early spring.
Yeah, I think it's January. Thank you. And then it closes in June. I can get you exact dates.
Okay.
And we've recently extended that window within the last couple of years. Feedback, they've asked for that window to be expanded so that they're able to provide that to more parents.
Parent involvement subcommittee, do you guys have any suggestions? I know you guys have brought it to the forefront before, but do you, just off the top, do you have any suggestions that you could bring forth?
Well, I think the suggestion was that can we make it part of the ARC meeting? Instead of sending it out via email or text or paper format. Can it somehow be a part of the ARC process to get parents to fill out that form?
I actually had more of a comment. I don't know that I'm necessarily on the subcommittee, but I've been involved in some of this conversation before. So I think one of the things is like, there's a fine line between pressuring parents into it in front of a group of people at an ARC meeting. Again, we want our data to be authentic for one. So I think that kind of is probably something that's saying like, okay, it is a part of the process. We may not get the best form of data that way. But I do have a question that might be manageable. Again, I don't know how that data is collected, but is there a way to see the districts that have the highest rates in completion, like how they're sending that information out? So if they have a higher completion rate, again, can we get some guidance, I guess, from districts or co-ops to say, okay, like how is your district sending these things out? Is it paper-based? Is it, a form? Is it during this time of the year? Like different things like that to be able to see like, okay, if they're, even if that's just suggestions through the co-op and that's something that goes through, like, hey, this district has been very successful based on their input. I don't know, something to think about that wouldn't feel so compliant, but get districts engaged in like, okay, how do we do better? Not just, hey, you must do this.
I'll say that I've attended our regional SURTAC meetings, and districts do have those conversations with each other. They share their participation rates. Again, like Greta said, everybody likes a competition, and they also share tips on what they do to increase their participation rate. So I know there's work going on amongst the districts where they're communicating that information. But again, I think the districts, I agree with your statement about authentic data and ensuring that parents feel comfortable in administering that survey or taking that survey. That's why we offer both in paper form and electronic form for those parents. And then I just want to update, I did get the dates sent to me. It's January 15th is when the window opens, and it closes June 30th. Thank you.
I have a follow-up. I agree that, this is Michelle Morgan, sorry. I agree with that conversation that we don't want to pressure parents. And so I think, could it be something like as part of the meeting, right? You start the meeting, you introduce people, you offer parent rights. Could it be something as simple as the school saying, have you gotten your link to the parent survey, or would you like us to give you a paper copy? It doesn't have to be completed there, because I agree that's a pressure situation. But then we have a statement where the school has said, hey, have you gotten this information? And that way, if the parent hasn't gotten it, isn't aware of it, if there's an opportunity to ask about that. And then if they say, no, thank you, then that's fine. But if they say, no, but I would really like it, the school can send the link or hand the paper copy, and the parent can do it later. So it's part of the process, but not necessarily part of the meeting.
I think that's a good suggestion that we could share with districts. I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you for that, Michelle.
You're welcome.
And even now that we know this window, even if it is, to your point, Michelle, even if it's not a part, if they're not having ARC meetings in the spring, when they are having them in the fall, you will say in January, and I'm sure that they're doing it, but again, you just reiterate, starting January 15th, we have a survey that's come in very important to you, and because to your point, making it a part of the process, but not making it a laborious task or point your finger. Because we know if we don't have that face-to-face in June, they don't have an ARC, then what, we could still be having the conversation. I like that suggestion. Any more for parent involvement? Thank you again for the work that you're doing on that, to increase in how we can be of benefit with completing that indicator 8 survey for us. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Ms. Veronica. Now, are we going back to transition? Not yet.
Can or up to you.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Is transition ready? Okay. Now we'll go back to transition subcommittee.
So in order to answer some questions and give some information to some of our guests in the audience around transition, one of the things that this is an overlap with the council, we were going to have some presentations from different council members about different programs. So I work with the Kentucky Office of Autism and the work with the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism. Hopefully we'll have it over. It's great when technology works. You can go to the next slide. Oh, well, there you go. So I work as the executive director. I'm an office of one, but I work within the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities within the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. And part of the role of that director is to staff the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism. There's an executive committee and 3 subcommittees: early childhood, school age, adolescent, and adult. And those intentionally have kind of overlapping transitional ages to them. Most of the work happens, of course, in the subcommittees. We have a website that is hosted through UKHDI, and this will go out afterwards. And there's a hyperlink. Any places I think in blue up there, you'll have a hyperlink to get to different resources. But the website is there on your right. If you pull it up, that's kind of the first page that you'll receive. All the first 4 resources are really by age groups. So you've got birth to 3, school age, adolescent, and then adult. And then part of what I work on is some of the council projects. One of the council projects that we are invested in besides the website is called Innovative Supports for Autistic Workers, which is a wonderful resource I'll talk about a little bit more later in the presentation. That can be a great transition resource. Other things that I'm involved with between state work groups and state council is a lot of constituent calls and emails. And then our KYACA, or the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism, puts together a biannual report. You can go to the next slide. These are some of the partners that are, or member organizations. The Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism was created back with a work group back in 2011. And that work group was made up of different state agencies looking to do a better job partnering together. In 2013, an executive order was signed, creating both the Office of Autism and the council. And these are some of the council partners that in 2016, when this was put into legislation, are around the table. You can go to the next slide. So this council is chaired by the University of Kentucky and your University of Louisville. This is just a list of all the different members. But what you'll notice in green up there is originally we had one consumer representative or self-advocate. And then we had several parents that were either citizens at large or also in other capacities on the council. What we found is we had 4 or 5 parents over the years, but we didn't have as many self-advocates. And we've intentionally, since I started in 2018 with this group, tried to have more folks with lived experience around the table. So we now have 6 self-advocates appointed to the council, including one of the co-chairs, and then our other co-chair is actually a parent of an autistic. Next slide. So what we've worked on is work towards becoming more autistic friendly. And much like deaf and hard of hearing have embraced their identity and like to be called deaf and hard of hearing, many autistics appreciate that as well. So many of us were trained, whether I was a behavioral health background or and education background, we're trained in, individuals with disabilities and really being person first. We know from the autistics that they really embrace this. Many of them do and appreciate being called autistics. So the vision for our council, autistics of all ages are engaged in self-determined lives and are valued citizens in the community. And the mission is to really promote collaborative efforts and advocate to improve systems of supports for individuals with autism or autistics. Our 2022 elevator speech, which is also part of strategic planning, really embraced BIPOC language. But what we found over time is it's really, you look at one special population and, there's so much intersectionality in autism, both with looking at Black, Indigenous people of color, but there's also LGBTQ, there's an intersection with other disabilities that we've really talked a lot about intersectionality. But KYCA, there you go. What we've learned over time is more about lived experience. And so not only having both the autistics and parents of individuals with autism at the table, we actually even changed the name, not legislatively. So it's still in legislation that says the Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism Spectrum Disorders, but the current council amended the title to be a little bit more friendly and intentional in reflecting autism through more of a strength-based perspective or through more of the social model of disability. So we know from the behavioral health field, we have to work from the medical model, the DSM-5 TR, from the educational eligibility criteria. It still tends to be a little bit more deficit-based as well. So when we talk about the social model of disability, we're really trying to have autistics at the table and promote a more neuroaffirming approach to our work. And that really comes around autistics telling us that, in disability community, saying nothing about us without us. Next slide. So looking at autism spectrum disorder versus more of a neurodiversity paradigm or social model of disability, on the left, you have what we have to work with, which is the medical model or the educational model of the linear spectrum. You have what used to be called high function. People don't really like using those terms anymore. I hear them a lot, but I oftentimes talk about low support needs is a more appropriate term. And that's actually in the DSM-5, needing level 1 or lower support, level 2 needing a little bit more support, and level 3 needing more substantial support, which is still not the most strength-based, but that kind of helps people with that autism, kind of high-functioning autism, what used to be called that, autism, and then severe autism, or some people who really want to have profound autism. All of that's under a spectrum, but unfortunately, many of us look at that as a linear spectrum, and that's really not helpful in many ways because that's like what we do. And I used to say as a teacher, we used to categorize children, even if we didn't mean to. We said, here's my good kids. Here's the ones that need a little extra work. Here's the ones that are really hardworking. However we categorize them, whether it's gifted and talented or whatnot, we do that and it becomes linear. And I think it's really important. And what I like from more of the neurodiversity paradigm, you've met one person with autism. I could literally throw a dart up there every time for you miss that you meet a person with autism. There can be overlaps, but it's more of that color wheel, that kaleidoscope. You have this executive functioning. Not all folks have as many executive functioning issues, but many autistics do. Not all autistics have severe anxiety, but they usually have some anxiety. Not all autistics, struggle with motor skills. I have one autistic I work with in private practice who is gross motor skill developed, as you can imagine. He's not one of my, like many of my other autistics who are not as, who are more apt to trip, fall, those sorts of things. So, using this more neuroaffirming approach, it really aligns more with that social model of disability. Next slide. So with intention, our goals for the last, through 2024 and onward is each one of the subcommittees have been working on different things. Early childhood has supported families and children with newly diagnosed with autism, and I've got a resource to share with you from that. School age has spent a lot of time addressing restraint, seclusion in the schools, as well as, unfortunately, also talking about suicide. Adolescent and adult has been addressing violence and abuse towards autistics, and also looking at increasing employment opportunities for autistic workers in Kentucky. So we also addressed many other issues, the availability of resources, talking about things like autism awareness, working with families and providers, and certainly autistics themselves. Next slide. So as far as transition, it's not going to be easy to see, but one of the things we've been really excited about is it took over a year, but we had a group of autistics and educational providers, medical providers that came together with the understanding that we wanted to create something that was more strength-based or neuroaffirming. If I Googled toilet and autism, I would probably get a particular group that would pull up, and that's the resource I would get. I'm not naming the group, but that group, unfortunately, has just now started getting autistics to the table versus having autistics there at the beginning. So we were intentional. If you clicked on toileting, which is on here, it's one of the subcategories, you would get something, I think, from the United Kingdom. It's from their autism advocacy group that is built by autistics and parents of autistics. So this autism resource sheet was created by the Early Childhood Subcommittee with the goal of helping newly diagnosed parents and children get into services. What we found over time is, and through this work, is this can really be used for any age. It's not just early childhood. Let's see if I can pull this up. I had it up a second ago. In the categories up there, the first one, it says connect with other families. The first one is actually learn more about autism, the blue category. Oh, you go one back. The blue category up there is learn more about autism. So if you open those links, what is autism? It's actually a resource created by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and it's a good, simple language document about what is autism. Autism 101 is actually a great resource created by autistics. We even have books about autism, which is the last category up there, that is a Google link to autistic individuals in Kentucky that have helped put together a list of fiction to nonfiction books from early childhood all the way to adult. The yellow is connecting with other families. The first yellow up there, there's a start guide for families. There's also an intentional link to regional family support groups that's kept by the Kentucky Autism Training Center, which is a wonderful resource. Kentucky Spins up there, as you can imagine. Family to Family, which is the Office for Special Healthcare Needs. So there's about 4 or 5 links under each one of these colors and these categories. Without going into all of them, I will tell you the fourth one down is kind of pink up there. It is establishing school plans. So of course it has the Kentucky Early Intervention System, which most of us know as First Steps. Still having a hard time saying KEIS, but that is that program. Then we have state funded preschool and some links to that. We also have the KDE Autism Guidance Document, which was just revised in June of 2023. And there were a couple of us as part of this group and Kentucky Autism Training Center that helped give input to Veronica and others. And then there's a link to Kentucky Spin IEP and 504 infographics because they've got some wonderful stuff. I say that because I think it's important that these resources go not just from providers, but they also include the larger disability community. I mentioned down in the blue supporting participation, there's sleep and autism, toileting, feeding difficulties, transition to adulthood, healthcare guide for youth and families. One of the last resources on there is in yellow. You can't see it unless you open this up, but there's not only a link to Kentucky Advisory Council on Autism, but there's a link to life course tools that are out of the University of Missouri, Kansas City, which are wonderful disability resources to help families and youth to look at a more person-centered or strength-based approach to transition. There is Kentucky Protection and Advocacy, supported decision-making, UKHDI and others. And then one of the best resources, it says Family and Youth Employment Checklists, which are UKHDI. There was one resource that I was going to tell people to go look at, and this was one of our transition resources on a page that we're still working on to give out during IEP meetings. but it gives you a list of birth or age 3 to 5 parents, 6 to 10, I think, 11 to 14. And then when you get to 11 to 14, it also not only has the parent resource, but it has the youth. And then it goes up through adulthood. And in there, it has some great resources and some examples as far as transition plans from kids, but also a blank transition plan for you to create. It has a good checklist of, am I going to be looking at, you know, kind of a traditional graduation or diploma track, or am I going to be looking at my child being in public school through age 21? It talks about OBR resources or vocational rehabilitation resources, all sorts of good stuff, including, am I going to be a parent that needs to look at guardianship or some sort of conservatorship for my child later in life? So having said that, we'll go to the next slide. Innovative supports for autistic workers. Even though this is a project created by autistics and geared towards employers, I tell folks that are newly diagnosed or families, go here, because there are small modules online that give you an overview from an autistic from their definition. And it was created with Beth Harp, who's actually one of our co-chairs at UKHDI that's on the council, along with several other autistics that do this work part-time. Two of the sheets that are up here, the first one on the left, you may not be able to see very well, but it's like meeting accommodations. What would I do for an autistic in a meeting? Well, when I tell folks, you know, the overlap of autism and disabilities, you will find that if you printed this out and you looked at it, most of this has things on there that we talk about during IEP meetings, like, do these lights buzz for some kids, and, you know, do they throw them off track? The smells, you know, Bev has always talked about, you know, it's great to have community meals, but if you brought tuna salad sandwich, she's not going to be in the group with you because it's overwhelming to her sensory wise. It's probably not just overwhelming to an autistic, it's probably overwhelming to other folks too. So I think it's really important to utilize some of these resources. They could be utilized by all age groups. And again, this project is geared towards helping employers do a better job of understanding autistics, making particular accommodations for them. But in that, they have created these fact sheets and brochures that are also good for IEP meetings or for other people that are doing work with autistics. The last thing I'll say is they did create some modules for employers, but those modules, I think there's 8 to 10 modules now. They're 10 to 15 minutes. They do a really good job of walking you through, again, what is autism and what are accommodations that not just could be made at work, but also could be made maybe later in high school or later in middle school. Things to be thinking about that could make a person's life so much better, and things that we don't always think about as neurotypical folks. Next slide. So that's my quick overview. Was a little off track from some of what we're doing in transition, but I did want to share certainly that resource that we just came up with the early childhood work group and also the ISAW information. Do you all have any questions? Also thought it would be great for the parent that came and presented. So glad that we could make that work during this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with this continued path, before I stepped into this role, I've gone on transition, and we talked about this resource that we wanted to get out to parents at the IEP meeting, and have looked at several models that HDI is doing very, very well. So thank you for the work that you continue to do on behalf of that subcommittee, because it's kind of just you now. Any questions online? Michelle, you're recognized at this time. Is there?
I was muted, sorry.
Okay. There you go. You got the floor.
That sounds wonderful. So my question is, can your division, how can they help a parent like the one who spoke during public comment, who has done the research and has tried to work it out with the school, but is still struggling to have the child's IEP implemented appropriately? What resources do you have for parents in her situation?
Oftentimes thank you so much for the question. I think it's not an easy one to answer as far as what resources are out there. Obviously, the KDE autism guidance document is a wonderful resource, and you would be surprised or not surprised how many educators, even because we've had so much transition, may not be aware of that resource. And that could be a great resource to say, oh, here's some things that could be happening. Here's some best practice or some guidance. That's one resource. The other is getting them connected to other families. Families usually know way more than the rest of us, professionals, especially in their particular locales. I can speak generally to, here are services across the state, here are things that may be able to be helpful, but a family can speak to, okay, here's my experience working with the school or the school in this region, and here's where I had some success, here's some things that, I couldn't get changed or couldn't get help with, but can give them a more realistic perspective, I think, of what's available. Each school, I talk about culture a lot, that, we all work from different cultures, and school districts are their own culture, and then let alone the actual school themselves is their own culture. So you can't always assume that one school is doing something like another school is doing, even in the same district, because they may have done it one year one way, but then a principal switches. And this is so much like the child care speeches I used to give, which is that transition. We could do all this wonderful TA through KDE, through other, the Certex and others, but transition happens, and it happens also with staff. And then all of a sudden, as parents, you're then stuck having to make new decisions and work with new folks. We don't have any. We used to have a program of educational advocates that were trained through KDE years ago. Most of that list is, I think, most of the folks have retired. There's very few people that can go to ARC meetings, but I think certainly understanding the ARC process and also getting some help from Kentucky Spin and others can be helpful. I've also seen some situations where I've been able to talk to KATC and find out if they've been involved in one of their training programs, or if the Certex have done anything recently with the particular school system, to find out, are they getting connected to the right people? Because there may be some good people that are in that district that just, especially a large district, they may not have always the best voice at the table or the best understanding of what's available to do in a particular district. So it's not an easy question to answer, but I certainly take phone calls. I talk to constituents, and I try to get them plugged into the right resources. And I certainly, don't mind having my name out there through email or through my work cell phone for folks to contact. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll recognize Zach Stumbo with your hand raised.
Hey, I just wanted to say it's a really good resource. I think a lot of you were with us last year when we adopted our son, and he has two other brothers who have been diagnosed, and our son was recently accepted into First Step. So I know I've even shared this today within our family. So thank you.
Hear that.
Thank you again, Tal, for the work that you continue to do for SAPEC and the autism community. Really appreciate it. Any more questions in person? Any more questions online? Next on the agenda, we have the Supervision and Legislative Subcommittee. Do I have any members present with any updates? Hearing none. Next on the agenda, Free Appropriate Public Education Subcommittee. Faith?
Yes, I think, I don't know if other people are present from the group, It looks like, again, unless I'm missing documents, that we do not have any updates since the last meeting. I will say it looks like we got panel ideas around eligibility, diagnosis, discrepancy model, disproportionality. And we had discussed discrepancy model and RTI. Looking back at these notes. And then we noted for disproportionality around what resources, I guess, co-ops and districts are given around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Oh, excuse me, from the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Council. And I don't know very much about that, so I can't necessarily articulate anything else on that. That is all the notes that I currently see. But I do think listening to our guest speaker as well gives us some other things to kind of think through. How do we support? What does our discussion look like? And then get with Department of Education to kind of talk through what those things might look like for co-ops in regards to what it currently looks like and how we can support, or, you know, honestly, at what capacity can we build upon those things?
If you guys bring to us again any recommendations so that we can present that from the FAPE committee, we'll be happy to entertain that and how we can push that forward to continue to support. Do we have any additional questions for the FAPE subcommittee in person? The communication and stakeholder engagement. Mr. Bradley, we have finally merged you as one.
And I'm not sure if anyone on in the group is online. I don't think there is, but we do have the Facebook page up and running and getting liked. So I'd like to encourage all the panel members to check that out on Facebook. Of course, members of the KDE as well. Check out the Facebook page, like it and share it. Get the information out, the better. And Tad, with your permission, I want to share the information you presented today. So that is really good information that we need to get out there. So it's the Kentucky State Advisory Panel for Exceptional Children is the name of the Facebook page. So please like it and follow it. And that's really the update that I have at this time.
Thank you so much. Again, continue to share that. We see it's getting us a little traction, a little action. So yay. Thank you for the work that you're doing on that committee as well. And finally, do we have any representatives from the ad hoc committee in person or online? And I want to say, members, we know that these subcommittee meetings and meetups and group has presented its challenges over the past year with meeting and continue to be in compliance with the regulatory issues online and in person. And I thank you again for staying steadfast to the work that we're doing for the children that we serve across the Commonwealth with your respective subcommittee groups. And I see you, and I'm not the I saw that the autism speaks of, but I see you and I see your work. So thank you. I'm gonna, ask a question to Associate Commissioner Hilton. If we move you up before lunch, are you okay with that?
For the DMS update,
DMS update, or do you want us to pause?
I can do that now if it's convenient for you.
Okay,
That what you want me to do?
I'll amend the agenda. Can I get a motion to amend the agenda for the second time?
So moved.
I'll
Yeah.
second. Tiffany Clark.
Thank you. We will now have, the DMS 2.0 update. Perfect. Yes, technology.
All right, thank you, Dr. East. And first off, I want to say thank you to panel members as we have been going through this monitoring visit from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs. Several of you have been involved in interviews and have participated in one way or another. And so I appreciate the time and energy that you have put into this monitoring visit. It has been a heavy lift, obviously, for the feds as well as the state, I'm sure. And they've reached out to, they being USED, they've reached out to a number of parents, local districts, the panel members, and other stakeholders across the Commonwealth to get input about the work of special education across Kentucky. As you know, or may remember, we had our on-site visit in November, and OSEP was here for 3 days, did a very extensive review of files, lots of questioning. It was 3 long days in a conference room with not only the staff from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, but staff across the department. So we relied on many offices across KDE to provide support to us around the areas of finance, data, legislative updates, all things education. And, huge shout out and thank you to everybody at the department who contributed to that. It was actually, to be such a heavy work, it was a good 3 days. And that probably the most important update that I'll share is that I think as a result of going through this process, we have gotten stronger as an office. It's going to enable us to continue to provide additional support and technical assistance and guidance to our districts, because we've identified areas where we have opportunities for improvement as well. That being said, we do not have a final report of findings from USED. As you remember, and you'll see on their website, they told us that within 120 days of completing the onsite, which was actually the last hurrah, if you will, of all of the interviews that they did over actually a couple of year period. We started this in 2020 and then we paused and then we came back. So it's been going on for years. They told us we would have the report in 120 days, and we're at currently day 161. We don't have the report in our hand as of yet. In February, we received a call back from USED asking us for additional information around our significant disproportionality. We hopped on a call in March, provided that information. They have not presented any follow-up questions, but currently they are actually on the phone with some TA that they would like to provide. And so I'm going to hop out again quickly because they told me to come back at 11. So this is perfect timing. Jump on that call and they have hopefully more information to share momentarily. But for now, that's where we are. We're patiently waiting.
I won't open the floor up so you can make that on time. You got 2 minutes. I will thank you always for allowing me to serve in this capacity and just keeping us abreast to the findings and figuring out what we can do differently. So thank you. I'm going to ask for another amendment to the agenda so we can move up our due process update from Carol Ann Morrison.
So moved.
Can I get a second? It's been moved and properly seconded that we amend the agenda. And now to the floor for our due process update. Ms. Carol Ann Morrison.
Thank you, Carol Ann. I have 3 updates to share with you today. And if you want to go to the next slide, I think the numbers are listed there. So when we receive these, Misty emails all of you a copy of the redacted version of the decision. We also post those online on our KDE dispute resolution webpage. So those are available to the public as well. And then what I try to do when I come to you each meeting is to just summarize the ones we've received since the last meeting. I try to keep it brief and just kind of go over the issues that are involved and what the findings were. But if you ever want additional information or you want me to bring something else forward, please feel free to let me know and I'll do that at the next meeting. I want to make sure I'm meeting your needs with these summaries. So the first, actually, all 3 of these today are decisions that were made by the Exceptional Children's Appeals Board. So the due process hearing was finished, and then one of the parties appealed to the Exceptional Children's Appeals Board, which we call ECAB for short, so I'll reference it as ECAB. So each of these decisions went before the ECAB. So this first one, in the first decision, the student's mother had requested a due process hearing back in 2021, and the parent alleged a failure to provide a free and appropriate public education, known as FAPE, and an administrative hearing was conducted. The parent had the following issues in that hearing: whether the district failed to develop an appropriate IEP, whether the district failed to implement the IEP, and whether the district committed procedural violations that amounted to a denial of a free, appropriate public education for the student. The parent was asking for compensatory damages as the remedy for the alleged violations. In the initial hearing, the hearing officer found for the district in all of the issues, except for one thing. They said that the district failed to provide 10 virtual sessions that were due to the student. And the parent stated at the hearing that this had been made up and paid for by the district. So the hearing officer found that no additional compensatory services were due to the student, since that had already been made up and taken care of. The parent appealed the hearing officer's decision to the ECAB. The appeals board determined that the district developed an appropriate IEP. They did not fail to implement the IEP. And there were not procedural violations that amounted to a denial of FAPE, a free, appropriate public education. So therefore, the appeals board affirmed the decision of the hearing officer, and there was no additional relief due to the student. Any questions on that one? Okay. Our next one is agency case number 181912, and that was brought before the ECAB as well. In our October SAPEC meeting, I brought you a summary of that original due process complaint. So I'm not going to go back through all of that today, but in that original due process hearing, there were multiple issues that were brought up. There were 2 issues that were brought up that the hearing officer said he didn't have jurisdiction to rule over. And then the student timely appealed the decision to the ECAB. The ECAB noted that the hearing officer ordered the district to provide the student 27 hours of orientation and mobility training, but denied any other relief. So you may remember from the summary in October with this case, this student was ordered to receive that 27 hours of orientation mobility, but that was it. Nothing else was awarded to the student. The ECAB considered findings regarding the transition plan for the student, Braille, sign language, orientation and mobility services, manifestation determination, credit recovery work, and graduation ceremony. So there were several issues in this case. The ECAB stated that the student bears the burden of proof and that the student has to prove that each element of the case. And so I'm going to share with you the determination that the ECAB made. The student failed to prove that the school did not design and implement an appropriate transition plan.
The disciplinary transfer was proper. Notice of the manifestation meeting was given, and the student's misbehavior was not a manifestation of the student's disability. The student completed classes and tests required to qualify for graduation from high school, passed credit recovery tests, received necessary accommodations while taking those tests, and was properly exited from special education services. The student was not inappropriately denied an opportunity to participate in graduation services and related activities. And then they agreed with the hearing officer that the officer lacked jurisdiction to rule on the claims that the student made about disparate treatment under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and also stated there was no proof of discrimination. So the ECAB in this case affirmed the decision of the hearing officer and found no relief due to the student. Any questions on that one? Okay. And our last one is case number 232407 that was heard by the ECAB. For this case, I provided the original summary of the case at the January SAPEC meeting. And the issues in this case were centered around the student's expulsion, if you you may remember those. And so the hearing, I'm sorry, let me back up. In September of 2023, the student requested the due process hearing. In October, the hearing was held and an decision was issued by November, and the decision was in favor of the district. So the student then submitted a timely appeal to the ECAB. The student didn't appeal all of the rulings by the hearing officer, but only appealed 4 issues. And those issues were whether the district failed to identify the student as a student with a disability, whether the school district failed to expeditiously evaluate the student by taking 118 days or 63 school days, whether the school district violated the federal requirements regarding a manifestation determination, and whether the school district, through the school board, interfered with the student's placement decision without being a member of the student's admissions and release committee. In this case, the ECAB affirmed the hearing officer's decision and stated the school district did not violate the student's rights to a free and appropriate public education. So in all 3 of those cases, the ECAB upheld the hearing officer's original decision. Any questions from any of those that you all might have? That's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Caroline, for that due process update. I asked for our final amendment of our presenters and guests today for Ms. Veronica Sullivan to come up with a guidance update. Can I amend the agenda one more time?
So moved. Second.
Thank you so much for being flexible, Ms. Veronica.
Okay, so I just have a couple of guidance documents I'm gonna update you on since the last time we met. We have created a quick guide for anyone who wishes to engage in dispute resolution process. If you've ever visited the KDE website, we have a breakdown of the 3 options for dispute resolution. But we get a lot of technical assistance calls from complainants that really want more information about each of the processes. So we took that data and we created a comparison chart that we found from a national TA provider, and we adapted it for Kentucky so that it's got Kentucky's information in it. We always encourage our parents and our families to communicate with our districts. That's first and foremost. So you'll see that on the guidance. I believe you have a copy of this in your folder. If not, it's also in the online folder that's available to you. And that is in the top box. So we really do want to encourage our families to communicate with the districts because that's what's best for the child. Keeping that line of communication open. But then we go into a comparison of each of the options for dispute resolution, which is mediation, formal written complaint, and then due process hearing. And those are the hearings that Carol Ann just shared with you. So we may have that available on our website. The next guidance we developed, and you all should be familiar with this topic, specific learning disability. This panel has talked about it quite frequently. We have been collecting questions from the field around specific learning disability, both from families and from our districts. And what we developed a question and answer document. So there's no changes to eligibility determination for specific learning disability. I just want to be clear. We didn't make any regulatory changes, but what we did is we created a question and answer document to accompany our already existing specific learning disabilities guidance document that's out there. And it just answers some of those questions that we hear frequently from individuals. I would like to personally thank Michelle Morgan on this panel for meeting with me to voice her questions and concerns that she thought needed to be addressed as well. And she has mentioned that and shared that with the panel in the past, but she actually met with me outside of the SAPEC meeting to give me some more information. I also sat down with a team from Kentucky Spin, which is our parent training and information center, to get more information from them as well before we develop this guidance. So I just wanted to bring those two pieces to your attention, and I'll take any questions you may have about those two guidance resources.
Do we have any questions online? Michelle, you're recognized at this time.
Hi, it's Michelle Morgan. I don't have a question. I do just want to say that I appreciate the new documents that KDE has put out. I have forwarded them to many families already, and they've been very helpful. So I appreciate you taking the time to look into that and talk to different parties and come out with those extra documents. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you for always being able to express your needs to the panel, to KDE. It's always helpful with the lens that you look through. So we appreciate your continued efforts inside and outside of SAPEC. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Any questions in person? Thank you again, Veronica. We appreciate the work that you continue to do to support us. Team, I am going to give you back some of your day today. That actually wraps up our SAPEC meeting for this quarter. Don't forget to please turn in any travel documents to Angie Gould, and she will be processing travel lodging that you have to attend today's meeting. Always extend a very big thank you to Misty Green that keeps me on my toes and makes sure I have all of my documents ready to go. So thank you always for driving up to see us today. We appreciate you. Our next meeting is scheduled on July 18th. If you could mark your calendars. Remember, we will have this as a hybrid model as well, but you are more than welcome to join us in person at the 300 Sauer Building here in Frankfort, Kentucky. Are there any additional announcements from online that we need to be aware of? Are there any in-person announcements? I'm not getting any bounce backs that I used to when I'm sending out emails. either from the commissioner's office or KDE. But if you have any changes to your emails, will you please either email myself or Misty? Thank you to my new executive board, Vice Chair David Bradley, Emily Fox. Well, I can't wait to reach your minutes now. For stepping into this role last quarter. So I appreciate you and look forward to working with you. The time is 11:14 and we are adjourned.